Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Tales from the Loop, Episode 1. This is the new Amazon Prime original series, a science fiction kind of anthology series, more than that when we talk about it in a minute. But this is their new Amazon original, so we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do, because it's the first episode, and we'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers. So this is an eight episode season. It is based on the artwork of someone, which is an interesting thing to hear. It's not based on a story, it's not based on a comic or a book or whatever. It's based on just the paintings. I don't have the painter's name in front of me, forgive me, but which is, I think it's interesting, because it's like, okay, the story's kind of up for grabs. You can kind of do whatever you want. You just try to fit an aesthetic, right?
An aesthetic, a tone, a mood.
Yeah, and we kind of like the trailer for this, and I wasn't actually sure, because I was starting the episode, and I was like, I'm not actually sure if this is like a more of an anthology or more of a full-on serialized thing. And I started off thinking anthology, and then in the middle I started to think, well, no, I feel like they're setting up these characters that I'm expecting more of, and then by the time I got to the end, I was like, I don't know, that felt kind of contained. And
I'm of the opinion it still feels more anthology-esque.
I think it is, but I think it's kind of soft anthology, and by that I mean I'm expecting some of these characters to kind of pop up, and alternatively, I think one or two characters in this story are going to have maybe their own episode later.
I can see that.
Yeah, because it's all from the same town, so it makes sense that, you know, unlike an anthology where it's just bouncing around all over the place, that there would be a little bit of overlap, there would be things coming together.
Yeah, I'm thinking like there's the grandfather character.
Mm-hmm.
I can see him having an episode.
Yeah, and even something as simple as like the security guard at the facility. Like, I mean, I'm not expecting it, but like, it wouldn't surprise me if like, oh, he happens to be like one of the main characters in episode 6, like, or something.
Yeah,
something like that. But yeah, so this first episode is called Loop, which, I mean, obviously,
imaginative.
Yeah, because but it actually does make sense. And the plot of the episode as well. So obviously it's kind of weird in terms of a show like this for spoiler free and no spoiler section, in the sense that we're really only giving you the spoilers or spoiler free for the first episode. But the general premise of this show is that in this small town there is a scientific research building which is underground, thinking a collider of some kind. I mean, that's the kind of the impression you get until you start maybe seeing some of the weirder stuff that's going on. And because of this, there's some weird happenings up above. There's like weird anomalies that happen in this town based on whatever scientific experiments are going on underneath, hence the science fiction nature of it. It's kind of got a retro future vibe. It's not really set in any particular time period. It feels a little 50s-esque at sometimes, but we also have robots. There's like big droids that are like working in the forest. And the art styles, again, and this is all based on the paintings that I was mentioning earlier, but it has a very kind of retro future look to it, and very I think in the trailer I compared it a little bit to Tomorrowland in terms of its artistic design.
I can see that.
Yeah. But yeah, so we have this first story is about this girl named Loretta, who has a very dysfunctional relationship with her mother, who kind of is more obsessed with her work down in the lab, and she disappears one day. That is the premise of this first episode. She just disappears, and it's probably got something to do with whatever research she was doing. She was doing something maybe a little bit shady that she wasn't supposed to be doing. She stole something from the lab, and she seems to have just disappeared and vanished off the face of the earth. So the episode is largely Loretta going around looking for her mother. But it takes some time setting this up. It takes some time kind of establishing that she wants her mother's kind of like love and attention and approval, and she's doing her best, and she's kind of the, you know, she's making dinner for both of them. It's not the mother that's making dinner, and Loretta's not that old. She's like, what, 10, 11, something like that. Yeah, maybe 12.
Yeah. Somewhere in that range, 10 to 13.
There you go. So it really sets this up, and I think what struck me about the episode was just its tone and its mood and its overall kind of feeling. I think that's really what they're going for here, first and foremost. And if we are leaning towards anthology here, I think it's very interesting to me to say, okay, we're going to do an anthology, we're going to do not quite a Twilight Zone-esque thing, but we're going to do something kind of in that style, but we're going to make it more specific in terms of its feeling. It's going to have this kind of melancholy childhood hope, but with bittersweet kind of
ethereal.
Yeah, it's a bit ethereal. Yeah, there's kind of this like we don't quite understand everything that's going on in the world or the universe, and it's affecting us, and we have to kind of accept how small we are in it. But here's some of the sort of magical stories that are going to take place because of it. Almost it has that kind of thing going for it. How did you feel about the first episode?
I'm quite mixed in that I really like the mood and the tone, all that stuff we are just talking about there. And the music does a large part of contributing towards that.
A lot of piano.
Yeah. I don't know who the composer was, but it reminded me a lot of like the stuff that was in like The Leftovers, the minimalistic style of piano and such. I found myself not caring at all about the actual plot of the episode, though. Like the characters, I didn't really care for. I was into the feeling. So it's kind of a weird mix for me.
I'm more positive than you are, I think. Actually, I was kind of into the kids and their kind of search, and like her kind of befriending this boy that she runs into after her mother disappears, and he sort of goes to help her look for her mother. I think once we kind of hit that point, I was kind of into it, and it's one of those things where the mood and the tone is a lot of it, where a lot of her being on her own, kind of like shoveling snow herself or making dinner herself and walking through the snow herself and like standing under an icicle and try to like get some droplets of water. Like all that stuff is kind of, what slowly makes me like her kind of thing, right? It's not so much like outright character beats as it is just kind of this lonely independence that she has that kind of draws me in. But I was kind of into it, and kind of because it's definitely got this little surreal kind of tinge to it, even though it's got kind of a idealistic kind of small town vibe that it wants to create as well. But there's kind of this surreal. It's a really hard thing to pinpoint, because if you just go a couple steps to the left, you're almost verging into Twin Peaks or something like that, where it's a bit more edgy. You've got an edgier
it's kind of
surrealness to it.
Halfway between Twin Peaks and Twilight Zone.
Yes. halfway between the Black Lodge and the Twilight Zone. Yes.
Yeah.
That's where we are. But I was into the story, and when it started to sort of do its little twists and turns as it was getting further into it, I was into kind of the reveal, and especially since when the reveal came, I actually got it quite early what was going on. And I think it was actually down to a performance. There was a moment from a performance that told me almost immediately what was happening, which I thought was kind of impressive. Actually, maybe it was supposed to be that obvious at that moment, but I think
that's part of my problem. Is I did find it a little too predictable. Maybe it's because the moments were played too well.
Yeah, maybe. But for me, that kind of worked, because it was like, okay, the point of the twists in this show aren't necessarily going to be to be like, whoa, we just got Shyamalan. Like, it's not supposed to feel like that. It's supposed to be this kind of slow realization, or like, I think the show wants us to kind of get it before it actually does here's the definitive line saying what's happening. And in this case, the character kind of like compares something. And it's like, okay, now we know what's going on for sure. But
I actually just, without ruining what the reveal is, there's a moment kind of just after it's made it very, very, very clear, and one of the characters kind of already knows what's happening and says, you know what's going on, right? And then kind of spells it out really quickly in like 2 sentences, and like this kind of really undermined a lot of that tone, which is kind of so hard to pin down. And it's it's so ethereal, by just kind of definitively giving it this quick sentence of this is what's happening in this particular instance. It took away a lot of that mystique, that feeling to it. I don't know. It just felt really expositionary in an episode which, up until that point, had felt incredibly natural.
It never really stuck out to me. I never really felt like I lost the tone, and because one of the things that happens is once it kind of reveals something, I actually still wasn't sure about an element of it, and it wasn't until later that it made it very clear, because it was always going to be one thing or the other, and I wasn't actually sure between the two where it was going with this, because the tone was doing such a good job of creating this mystique, that I wasn't sure if this was as simple. I mean, it's weird to say that this concept is simple, but comparative to what the other thing that I was thinking throughout the episode, I was like, oh, okay, all right, okay, so we're doing that. And I'm intrigued to have these characters kind of pop up again in small ways. Like if we see like one of these kids pop up, or we see, because Rebecca Hall plays one of the main characters in this episode. She plays the mum of the boy, and she's a fairly known actress, and her husband in this is Brandanowitz from Parks and Rec. And he's got the robot arm. We saw that in the trailer, and I'm expecting more from him because I'm pretty sure there's at least a clip of him in the trailer that wasn't in this episode. So I'm expecting him to have an episode, or at least where he features more prominently.
I would have thought so as well. Yeah.
So yeah, a connected anthology is kind of how I would say it. And I almost wonder if the show keeps going. Let's say it gets a few seasons. I can almost see there being kind of almost a small through line where, at the very least, the final episode will have a definitive kind of like, and this was the end of the loop kind of feeling to it. There'll be something at the end where it feels like it has come to a conclusion. And that's not to say that I expect each story or each episode to advance a plot of some kind. I don't. Like, I do think it's going to be sort of individual like anomalies, like different characters experiencing different things.
Just more that they reference things in the background that kind of allude to a larger tapestry.
Yeah, and maybe they do something fun. Maybe in like season 3, there could be an episode where 2 characters from previous episodes team up or something. They could do something fun with that if they wanted to. But so I think we'll give the spoiler warning so we can actually talk about the show. But I mean, Connor's mixed on it, likes the artistic sort of, or the approach of it, the aesthetic, the mood, all that stuff. I like all that stuff as well, and I think the story mostly worked for me, and I think it's because of the tone that it was going for that worked for me, because it wasn't like, if you did this exact same like sort of reveal and like an edgy, dark sci-fi movie, like it would have to hit different beats for me to work. Yeah. But in this, it worked for me. Especially since it does actually have some character growth that comes out of it as well, which is always good for science fiction. So full spoilers for the first episode then of Tales from the Loop. So of course, what we're actually dealing with here is that Loretta meets Cole, this boy, and they go looking to try and find her, and there's a beat, of course, after she's at his house for a little bit and she can't, we meet Rebecca Hall for the first time, but she doesn't meet her, right? Loretta never actually meets her, and then they go to this bar where her mother sometimes drinks, and she goes inside and she's looking for her, and she says, and she has this running thing where she calls her mum by her name. She calls her Alma because her mum doesn't like being called mum, and she
weird, but whatever.
Yeah, she runs up. Well, that's kind of the point. She runs up and hugs her, and then looks up and sort of freaks out and runs out. And it's Rebecca Hall. And it was actually that kind of moment I immediately got what was going on. Just because I felt like that reaction from Rebecca Hall, especially, but just the idea that, okay, why would she mistake her for her mother? It's because she looks like her mother. Why would she look like her mother? Because it's her. So the twist in the episode, or the premise of the episode really, is that there is a loop in some way, and that she is, I mean, this is the thing. So I got that, okay, this young girl is the same as Rebecca Hall. They are the same person. This is her as an adult with kids and a husband and yada, yada, yada. The question I had in my mind at this point was, is this simply time travel? Did the little girl just travel through time? Because it does this thing where her mother disappears, and I was thinking at this point, well, did she really disappear? Or did she just travel through time and that's why the house isn't there anymore? Right?
I mean, that would stand to reason.
Yeah, that's why she's missing. But no, she did disappear. Later on, we find out, no, her mother did disappear and she never came back. So both things did happen. So there's a couple of different things. And I love that visual, by the way. See when the older brother of Cole's explaining the supernova? Yeah. And you see the visual of the house just kind of like sort of breaking apart and like floating upwards.
Yeah.
Oh, it looked great.
That does look... Yeah, I mean, something we didn't really mention, the visual effects do look really solid.
Oh yeah, it looks wonderful. The robots look great. Even just the little things like, this material that came from the eclipse, they call it, that's in the loop. This piece of rock that she has, she sort of throws around, but it just kind of floats, and just the simple little things like that just look really good.
Yeah, and it is simple, I say, but it does look good.
Yeah. So, and then there's because the moment that really confirmed it for me was when she gets the phone call from the security guard, because young Loretta goes to the loop to ask like for her mother, and the security guard's like, oh, no one by that name works here, and she calls. He calls older Loretta and says, hey, this girl was here looking for her mother, and it was the way she like sort of reacts to this phone call and sits down and sort of starts crying, where I'm like, okay, now she knows. Like, not only is this confirming for me that they're the same person, this is confirming for me that she's just realized who this is.
And she has some memory of this happening. And she says as much, she always just thought it was a dream that she'd had.
Yeah. It was a long time ago, and it's such an unbelievable thing that, maybe, you would just kind of put it in the back of your mind, and there enough, one day this little girl comes running into your life, and it's like, oh, shit. Because she goes to where the house was, and she, and this is the thing, they sort of hide her name up until this point, and her husband says, hey, Loretta. It's like, oh, hey, she's got the same name. And they have this kind of heart-to-heart, and, what I like about the character journey is the idea that, Loretta, really feels alienated by her mother, and now she feels abandoned. And even though her mother didn't necessarily intentionally leave, whatever happened with the piece of rock, whatever experiment that caused her to disappear, she feels alienated by her. And we find out that Cole obviously gets kind of, Loretta to him as a mother is kind of cold and standoffish and
a bit distant, yeah.
So when older Loretta and younger Loretta finally have this conversation, and young Loretta says, oh, that's what Cole said about you, is that you don't want to be a mother. I actually really like the performance here. It does that, the one tear thing, kind of, but it does it in the middle of a conversation, which I thought was quite effective, where she kind of realizes she's kind of doing the same thing to her kids that her mother did to her. So that's where your character kind of lesson is for the episode, and this is what the experience has made her realize, is that looking back at her own childhood. And often with science fiction we say that it's really just simple messages wrapped up in cool stories, and here all it really is hey, be better than your parent. If your parent was a bad parent, you can be better than them. You don't have to become them. You can choose to grow out of that.
That plays with she gives her son the pine cone, and there's a moment where you question, did she know that he collected these anyway? Has she been attentive to her son, or is it just she remembers that day with him now and him collecting them?
Yeah. I think it's kind of sweet either way. It doesn't feel malicious, or not malicious, not the right word, but
it's the question is whether she was attentive or not, or was she a better mother than she appeared? Or is this just her actively okay, no, I'm choosing to make a better choice from here on out? I think either way kind of works.
Yeah, if anything, I almost like it more that way, because it's no, I'm trying now. Obviously my information here doesn't come from being a mother, but I'm trying now,
Yeah.
Again, from her own experience, which is kind of the whole point, right? Is that her own experience is letting her be a better person. So, and that's kind of the end of the episode. But she takes her down. So as we're having this conversation, it cuts to her taking the young Loretta down into because now she works at the loop. She can take her down, and we get to see the full eclipse, this big orb made up of all these rocks that kind of slot into place. And it's young Loretta putting this piece back that's been missing, that her mother took, that sends her home, sends her back to her time. Mm. And I like the somber nature of all this stuff, of the all the quiet of the piano music playing as it's all happening. It's really where the episode excels, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, that's the stuff I like the most, is that kind of that feeling that it has. And let's say the music is a large part of really establishing that. I think the direction as well, in terms of it takes its time on shots and things, especially at the opening. You say her going around a day doing under the icicles stuff, things like that. It takes its time,
and not to its detriment. It's about 55 minutes this first episode, and I didn't feel it. In terms of runtime.
No, it went in pretty easy.
I feel like you could condense this down to about 30 minutes if you wanted to just tell the story, but it would lose everything that makes it this show. it would lose everything that makes it Tales from the Loop.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like I say, the story itself is, for what it is, relatively simple. Mm-hmm. And you could condense it down pretty easily without even cutting much in terms of plot or character beats or even dialogue. It would just be a lot of the quieter moments that you'd cut out, and that would kind of take away a lot.
Yeah, but it knows how to handle them. It doesn't just feel like it's padding or killing time. It feels like, no, it's actually taking time to let us bask in the atmosphere, and it's a fine line. It's the difference between good direction and bad direction. I'll just quickly mention though, because I feel like people are going to be wondering, because I said I had two ideas. Is it time travel, which it was, so it's not super relevant because obviously it wasn't. But I was also thinking, are we getting really weird here where both timelines exist at the same time? like this idea that she does exist in the same town as her older self, and now the town's just going to be like this because of whatever weird things happen with the loop. Obviously, that didn't happen. It wasn't that, but that was just the other thing that was going through my head.
It's the sort of thing that wouldn't have surprised me if it had gone down that route.
Yeah, well, because one of the things earlier on when she's on her own is she hears this rumbling from underground, and it's sort of making all the rocks vibrate. And she goes back there with Cole later, and he has to listen to it as well. And that felt like something that could be like a seed for a later story that's not actually specifically for this episode. I mean, it works for this episode because it's teasing that, okay, there's big stuff going on underground, which is obviously ultimately what caused everything that's happening. But it feels like, okay, what specifically is causing all that noise, and what specifically...
Yeah, that's something we can still play with.
Yeah.
Like they could decide to tell us, no, it was just, the eclipse being unstable.
Yeah.
If they wanted to.
And I'm not even saying it's like, okay, there's going to be some big finale where everything, like every episode's going to feed into it in some way. I just mean that, episode 5 might be like, okay, so that's what that noise was. That was episode 5 story. Just happened to be teased in episode 1. Or they could go further with it, and that'd be cool too. But as far as an anthology of just cool little, like, sort of science fiction stories that feel... and they feel... I think they've got a nice kind of, at least from this first episode, it doesn't feel like it's super kiddie, even though it's focusing on kids, but it also doesn't feel like you can't show this to, it's not like a R-rated thing. There's not F-bombs or anything like that. It's definitely something you could show to like a 12-year-old quite happily.
It's child-friendly in terms of its content, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it would interest a lot of people under the age of maybe 14. Just in terms of the style of it, I think a lot of people at that age just wouldn't be interested.
Yeah. I think once anyone's at an age, whatever age that may be, where they're into stuff that isn't specifically aimed at their ADD level of brains, and that's not an insult. We've all been kids. I'm just like... But once you're at that point there where you can appreciate something that's a bit slower, I feel like it works for anyone from that point on.
Yeah, definitely. Because like I say, if someone did get to that point, at the age of 10, somehow, then there's nothing in this episode that you couldn't show to a 10-year-old.
No. So yeah, I mean, maybe the themes are a little bit mature, not in the sense that it's inappropriate, just in the sense that they may not get kind of what it's saying about
Yeah, sure, but that goes for all sorts of content that's kid friendly.
That's true.
Let's be honest.
I quite liked it. As an anthology show, and admittedly we didn't get around to trying amazing stories from Apple because Apple's a pain. But we obviously we tried the new Twilight Zone, and me and Tower did finish out the season, and it was terrible. This is exactly as an anthology show, which because you've not seen a whole lot of anthology shows, and then in terms of episode by episode anthology, right?
I've seen like a handful. I've not. I don't know if I've watched like the entirety of any. I just episodes here and there. I
feel like the quality of this for an anthology episode of something is actually very strong, and I'm like, I might watch the rest of this. I don't know how you feel about it.
I don't know. Let's say I'm not disputing the quality. It's clearly very well made. I just didn't connect to the actual story, and maybe that's just this episode. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Let me do the thing that I do. I used to do in. I still do in Twilight Zone.
They're going to have frustratingly vague descriptions that'll tell you absolutely nothing.
Yeah, the next one's called Transpose. A discovery in the woods gives 2 teenage boys an opportunity to step outside their lives and learn everything is not as it seems. Yeah, it's pretty vague.
Pretty vague.
It's pretty vague.
That doesn't give me much.
No, but yeah, I like this first episode. I mean, it doesn't sound like Connor's super enthusiastic, so it doesn't sound like we're going to be reviewing the rest of it. But
if you want to do one more, I can. And, maybe it was just this one that the story itself that didn't grab me. I don't know.
We'll leave it because then if you don't like it, we have 2 reviews, which is really awkward. Like,
horror.
What one makes sense. 2 instead of the whole thing is just weird. But
That's such a weird, arbitrary kind of distinction in your mind.
But I recommend it. And if I have time at some point, I will happily watch more of this show. I dug it. I dug it for what it is. But yeah, Loop. Is it good? So, if you tried out the first episode, you can let us know what you thought in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and the channel and everything we do here, you can head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and support us for as little as $1 per month. And you can keep all the content coming. And of course, at the higher tiers, you get early access to some content, bonus episodes of some others, voting rights, yada, yada, yada. Go and have a look and see if you're interested. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?